Good morning and welcome.
Good morning and welcome.
Good morning. Gosh, I think today's Tuesday. Is it Tuesday? I think we're all losing track of days, but it's great to have you on this webinar today. We had this is the first time Xenium's ever done a back-to-back webinar, and we're really lucky to have Linda Cohen today to talk about cultivating kindness during crisis. Resilience in a time of uncertainty, and boy is it uncertain. We probably need this topic more than ever, Linda, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so a couple quick little housekeeping items. So this webinar, we're really planning to probably stick to about half an hour. We might, just depending on the Q&A, we might go to about 40 minutes, but we're trying to get everybody out of here on time. We're recording this so you can share with your teams after this, and we'll share the slides as well. So look for that in your email inbox probably later today, I'd imagine. So I think that's it from a housekeeping item standpoint. So I want to talk about Linda real quick, and then I'll turn it over to her. So Linda has been the kindness catalyst for over 10 years. She's a sought after professional speaker and consultant on the ROI of kindness. Last year, Cohen delivered her Economy of Kindness, How Kindness Transformed Your Bottom Line keynote to dozens of organizations, including Kroger, Vermeer Leadership, Portland Adventist Health, and Idaho Hospital Association, nurse practitioners of New Mexico, and the Oregon Employment Department. Linda, you live in Beaverton, Oregon, I think, with your husband of 27 years, which is phenomenal. And you have two kids who are in college, but they're back at home, right?
Yes.
So how are you spending the stay-at-home time right now? Are you doing anything that's fun, exciting? Are you bored out of your mind?
We're walking the two dogs a lot. We have two Cavalier King Charles Spaniels. They're getting a daily walk, I would say. Drinking a lot of Earl Grey tea, which is my tea. And trying to keep the peace with 4 adults in the house now, not children.
So what are we gonna, I'll turn it over to you. What are we gonna talk about today? Maybe you could just kind of set the stage for what the agenda is for us.
Yeah, thank you, Brandon. We had done a podcast, was it 2 years ago, I think?
It might have been, because I think that was, so we call our podcast now Transform Your Workplace. And I think I called it the HR for Small Business podcast back then. So at least a year and a half ago.
Okay, good. Yeah. So Brandon and I got introduced a couple years ago. And like you said, I've been talking about kindness now for more than a decade, since my book was published in 2011, about doing kindness in memory of my dad. But today we're really going to talk about kindness through this time, through this kind of pandemic experience we're having. And I will say that I mean, the good news is I think we're having a kindness pandemic. Oh, yeah. I am so excited by the kindness that I'm seeing elevated during this time. I know it's a scary time. It's an unsettling time, but I am really excited by everything that I'm seeing. And that's one of the things that I hope in this time together, I'll give you a little idea or something to percolate with. But before we actually talk business, I just really want to take a minute to do a little self-care, if that's okay.
Yes.
I came up last week with 10 ways to cultivate kindness during social distancing. And I know that for some people, if you are social distancing and you're home by yourselves, or any of us, whatever we're doing, whatever we find ourselves in right now, I want to give ourselves a virtual hug. Because I know we're going to talk professional, but I do also think like we're all going through this unprecedented time and it's unsettling. So put your hands on your heart and take a deep breath in and let it out. And let's just start with some loving kindness for ourselves right now. You got this. This is not easy. We will get through this together. So, okay. Took a deep breath in and started. I think that is the biggest takeaway from right now, no matter where we find ourselves, working, not working, home with some other people, home alone. We're weathering something that none of us have been through together. And so I really hope that as we do this, we come through that stronger. So we're going to talk today about kindness as it relates to you in the workplace. And Brandon and I decided we were going to talk about adaptability and communication and recognition, because I think that those were 3 of the most important things that were kind of coming up through this experience. So let's start with adaptability. That is kind of the name of the game right now, right? For those of you who worked in offices and that's kind of where you've always done your work, you might not be there right now, probably. I have been a home, office-based person for more than a decade, but it didn't always start in an office where I am now. This was a guest room for years until my kids went off to college and we didn't have frequent visitors. I was often at the dining room table or the kitchen table. I would move my stuff in the evening, so you may find yourself in a situation right now where you have to be a little more adaptable. You might not have a door to shut. You might not have a screen, a curtain to put around you. So how can we weather that adaptability and be flexible in this situation? I want to share a couple of things that, companies are doing company-wide. And I jumped in, didn't I? We were going to do a question to start off, and I realized I jumped right into my
we gotta do that. Let's get
adaptability.
people engaged here.
Yeah. You know what? I'm going to pause on the adaptability right now because we
Okay.
did want to start with a question, and the question is about what kind of kindness you have received during this time. So thanks, Brandon, for keeping me on track. So let's in the chat box, let me ask you what kind of kindness you have received during this Corona experience. I've been self-isolating. Yesterday was day 40. So 40 days in the desert, right? So go ahead and put in the chat box if you have received an act of kindness during this time. And we'd love to see what people are experiencing. Has someone picked up groceries for you? Has someone gifted with TP from my mother from Brandy, like that.
What's funny is we had a neighbor gifted us TP and Hershey Kisses and just left them on our doorstep one day. So that was nice.
Your quarantine hug in the mail. I'd love to hear about that. Wow. Okay. Eggs and wine dropped off. Was that for Easter? I didn't see that, went by so fast.
It looks like it.
Love that. Oh, people made masks for me. That's awesome. Still have a job and getting paid. Yes, that is
grocery runs for each other.
Yeah.
Oh, there's a lot of great stuff here.
Awesome. It's awesome. The reason I wanted to ask that first, and thanks for keeping me on track, Brandon, is that when I do keynotes with businesses and associations, I'll often talk about how does it feel to be the giver of kindness? And most people think that's pretty easy. And when I say, how does it feel to be the recipient of kindness? A lot of people seem that's a little bit harder during normal times, during not pandemic. But I have a feeling I'm seeing with clients and, and professional friends that we are doing a lot of both right now. We're giving and we're receiving. And you know what? We're open to being recipients a lot more right now than I think we ever were. Would you agree with that, Brandon?
100%.
Because especially with this weathering, this sort of emotional roller coaster we're on, some days you really need to reach out to somebody and get a hug, get that virtual hug that you're feeling like you need right now.
There are a couple that I glanced at and I want to share them. So there's one that says white elephant gift, doorstep drop-offs with friends. That's really clever.
That's awesome.
And then another one is extra appreciation pay from an employer. And I think that's hard to come by right now. I think a lot of employers are probably like, okay, we need to freeze everything or, cut pay. But this one is appreciating. I like that.
I like that a lot. Thank you for sharing that one. Yeah. Well, let's keep looking through those. Let's jump back into that idea of adaptability. We were talking about doing it personally, and thank you for sharing on the chat the kindnesses you've received. The one key that I have noticed in doing this work for more than a decade is when we start focusing on what we are appreciative for, we get more of it. So so look for the good things that are happening all around you despite what's going on pandemic experience. So adaptability. If we think about companies that are being adaptable, we have companies like JetBlue that pretty much in the end of March started transporting masks and medical personnel when they were experiencing loss of business and revenue from passengers. Companies like Zara and Gap and Nike pivoted and became adaptable to create, their warehouses were beginning to create masks and the PPE that people needed. So companies are all kind of pivoting to figure out what they can do. I heard that Yale University was doing free online courses for like their best classes. So everybody getting creative and how to be adaptable through this time. And the photo that you just put up, Brandon, this is a colleague of mine in New Jersey. He owns a franchise franchise called Comfort Care, and they service seniors. And so all of their essential workers, their certified senior folks who are going out and seeing people in the long-term care facilities, they're out there every day. This is his wife, and his wife they made meals and were handing out meals to their workers, and of course all masked and everything. But he knew he wanted to, to thank them for being adaptable during this time, and they found a way to do that. So if you find yourself now back in your own house, in some way trying to be adaptable, one amazing question that came in when we were asking for questions before this webinar was, what's the most important thing an executive can do right now to lead through uncertain times? And I think it's being flexible. I think it's whatever you were doing in your office. Maybe you were having a weekly meeting. Maybe that's not going to work so much. Zoom fatigue is a real thing right now.
It is real.
And maybe you're switching, and somebody said that they were switching to every other week meetings with their all staff. Maybe that wasn't what you did, but maybe that's something you consider now. But flexibility in hours, in how we do our work. Maybe we reorganize what's most important right now, because you have workers who are, layered with not only working, but may have homeschooling that they're doing right now. So Brandon, I know you're one of those. So.
I am, and it's in what I want to say with the adaptability piece too, is just giving grace to people, knowing that you have a video call, you might have a kid come interrupt. I mean, that's happening to me all the time.
Yeah.
And people are forgiving with that, that kind of stuff.
Benefit of the doubt for sure right now. The other thing about adaptability is maybe create some new rituals. I mean, maybe and I know we're going to talk about this, I think, when we talk a little bit about ways to communicate, Brandon, but how are some new rituals you could do? I heard of one company that was like putting up a SpongeBob. I think it's the starfish. I really don't watch SpongeBob. It's been years since that, but there's like a starfish character, Patrick, I think. And they were putting that up at the beginning of their Zoom calls, like all these different pictures of Patrick and how he was feeling that day. And it was sort of a fun new ritual for their team to get together to talk about how are we all doing right now, and so finding fun rituals and ways to set out your day. And I'll just say, in terms of rituals, I told you I've been working from home for more than a decade. My ritual is, and it always has been really since my kids have been a little bit older, get up and do some yoga, have my breakfast with my husband, grab my cup of tea, and come down to my office by 9 o'clock. And that kind of ritual, even when we're staying at home, and you're smiling, Brandon, so I'm sure with children in the house, like it's all over the place. But
well, I'm able to have a routine quite like that, actually, because they're staying up later, and so they will they'll sleep in, and so I have like basically 2 hours of productivity time and quiet time, whereas in the middle of the day I don't have that.
Perfect. And I have heard people starting their day a lot earlier, to be able to get some productivity time, so then you can take time and be present with your kids, right? So yeah. All right, well, let's talk a little bit about recognition, about communication. That's our next topic, communication, and how are we doing that? I don't know how many of you saw CEO of Marriott early on. I would say maybe we were 10 days into the pandemic, maybe even less than that. He created a video that he sent out to all his Marriott employees. And in terms of communication, how important it is that you communicate. He has come through cancer. He's bald. His board of directors did not want him to go on camera, but he felt like it was really important to communicate with his Marriott employees. And believe me, he did not sugarcoat the news. The news was, we are going to close some hotels. We are going to be laying off people. But at the end, he was optimistic and hopeful after he kind of got teary and said, this is challenging. This is the hardest thing I've ever had to do, and we will get through it together. So this real optimistic sort of end to that. And if you haven't seen that, Arne Sorensen is his name. I know it's been viewed by all sorts of people. But I think that when we communicate, being really authentic and honest and vulnerable, especially if you're a manager or you're a leader, and this is hard for you too, I think that's really important. And then, how often do we communicate? I've talked to clients who are communicating every day. They're sending little messages every day, whether it's an email or a little text message with their teams. And then again, looking at how often you're meeting with your teams. Maybe you're changing that. Maybe you're being flexible in that way. But communication with your employees, I think the more authentic you are and the more open you are, the better it's going to be for your employees. I know you said, Brandon, when you and I first started talking about this, I think I saw you guys did some kind of a spirit Zoom call or a hat Zoom call. What was it?
Yeah, our leader of our sales and marketing team, she was like, "You got to dress up for our next team meeting," and I was like, "Dress up like, suit jacket, dress up in a costume." She's like, "Open to interpretation." So I put on my American flag hat and tank top and and I just went all America. And some people wore a Batman costume. Like we just had fun with it.
That's totally fun. And I think that as we're having to have these Zoom calls, being able to be creative about it, have a spirit week, have an entire spirit week, twin day, fun ways that you can, I know companies are doing happy hour and really letting loose with that. But I think just being able to have fun ways that we are connecting when we have to do it virtually can be really, really huge. So we put the chat up for this question, which is, what has your company done to elevate and enhance the kindness in your communication in these last few weeks? What have you done to help make that a little bit more palatable during this time? And I think we can't really know how people are really doing unless we ask the questions. How are you doing? So whether you do that one-on-one or whether you do that in a group capacity, I think that's really important. Anybody throwing up any ideas?
Yeah, one is saying launched a kudos campaign, thanking those who are still working in the office. Some people are taking the time to pick up the phone or do a video chat instead of firing off an email, which is all too easy.
Yeah. I think that's huge. You're right. Send out cards to employees. That's awesome. Actually, I have a question, which is, using breakout rooms, giving folks time in the community to share self-care ideas. Fantastic. I actually, we had somebody ahead of the ahead of the webinar who sent something out that says, remind employees to take care of themselves. Yes. And I asked Brandon, I think that's an amazing idea, and I think that's important. And I'm wondering if any of your companies have taken that extra step further, which is sending a little care package, a self-care package, something that, tea or chocolate or bubbles or essential oils or candle or something, and maybe just a little message to let somebody know we're thinking about you. And I know we have a picture that we'll get to when we do recognition, but are there ways that we can enhance that self-care that we're encouraging our employees to do? And kindness in communication. I just want to give all of you this idea. We did this. I'm the recent past president of our Oregon chapter of National Speakers Association. We had our board meeting a couple weeks ago, and I suggested that maybe we call our membership. We have about 100 members in the state of Oregon. And I said, as a board, let's break it up and let's each call 8 or 10 people and just check in on our membership and see how people are doing. So if any of you belong to an association or any kind of professional organization, the surprise of that request was that many of the board members who had sort of been like, okay, yeah, I'll make the phone calls, really loved it. They loved being able to be the check-in person. And of course, the people who received the phone calls really loved that touch base and having somebody check in. And I think it was an honest opportunity to talk about what's going on for wherever we are in this situation. So any other things that have popped up in the chat, Brandon?
Shout out and acknowledgements during a bi-weekly all-team meeting. Pay for memberships to online workouts. I love that.
Oh, I love that. Yes, that's awesome.
I could use that.
Really? Well, there is a lot of free online yoga right now for any of you who do yoga. But,
YouTube is like the best for all that.
Yoga with Adrian. Yoga with Adrian is
okay.
Amazing.
Thanks for the recommendation.
Yeah. A kudos campaign is a great idea. Do you mind sharing more? So we have to ask.
That came from. Who did that come from? That came
kudos
from
campaign. If it was you, tell us.
It more. Was Brandy launched a kudos campaign, so maybe we can connect those two.
Perfect.
And we can learn more. I love that idea, though.
I do. That's awesome. Somebody in the questions ahead of time said they're needing to be more creative. How can we be creative in doing the recognition? So let's talk about recognition, because that was kind of the third piece of what we were going to talk about. So Personal recognition. I loved this photo. This photo just brought tears to my eyes. This gentleman thanking the emergency care workers for saving his wife's life. I mean, personally, and I'm sure you have seen, you know, huge wooden signs getting put up at hospitals thanking the heroes, thank you signs getting put in people's, you know, windows to thank the delivery people. I mean, any kind of recognition and acknowledgement. And it is one of the pieces I talk about regularly in my keynote, is about how important recognition and acknowledgement is, and now kind of even more so. I think it's been elevated. So personally, we have ways to do this. And professionally, I know I have one other photo, I think, Brandon, which was
yeah.
a recognition for a company. This is a colleague of mine who's kind of new at a company and posted this on LinkedIn maybe a week or two ago. This came from her boss. Quarantine sucks without you. I loved that. And sent her a little succulent. Steal the idea. It's so cute. It's so clever.
So nice.
And she loved it. Obviously, she put it up on LinkedIn because it meant something that her boss had taken the time to send these out. So, so recognition, acknowledgement, I think, is always important. I do want to just mention, I'm sure some of you are also Fred Meyer Kroger shoppers. They've been doing an amazing job. Oregonian, full page ad, thanking their folks who are working hard so that we can get our groceries. Last week when I drove on 217 to pick up my groceries, there was a huge billboard. Do you have billboards? Do you have places you can be putting kudos and thank yous and acknowledgements? You know, go use those, because that could also be a way that we are publicly acknowledging what's going on. So go ahead, Brandon. I know you had a couple of great ideas.
Yeah, so there's a couple things that I've run across. So one thing in particular is so much like people have mentioned, we do a recognition shout out during our monthly all team meetings. Well, since the all team meetings virtually stopped and we didn't get a chance to really share the recognition, we thought we'd take it a step further. So Julie Matheson, who's on my team, and myself, we weekly will get on a video call and we'll read out the recognition for the week. And a lot of times we'll have 30, 40, we call wow cards, which you'll see a thumbnail of what the wow card looks like, where you nominate somebody, you put your name in as the nominator, and you select which we call it Xenium promise. It's like basically a principle that we abide by. So like, I will honor my commitments. You check that box and then you'd flip it over and then write how somebody had honored their commitments. And so we always try to tailor it with whatever our principles are. And so we'll read them off during this video. And lately, the last 3 weeks, so we've had 5 weeks so far. Our president, Ann Donovan, who's right here, she's been on, and so she'll read the cards with us, shout out the recognition, and then she'll usually do like a State of the Union type thing at the end of the video. So it's a great way to be open and transparent while also recognizing people in a fun banter sort of way.
You see how they're all smiling too?
Yeah.
Like, obviously it means something, you know?
It totally. And then a couple other things. So I want to show this little video real quick. So this was fun. So this is one of our HR teams. Somebody on the team was having a birthday, and they wanted to be able to recognize her. And so they basically pull up to the parking lot at least 6 feet away, if not, it looks like more. And they got in their trunk or the tailgate, and they had lunch together, essentially. And so they were just celebrating somebody's birthday. And then this other thing, which I thought was really unique, this is actually my wife's organization. Their boss had a birthday. And so they basically took video clips of all the staff members, and they did like, I want to say 10, 15 seconds where they just said, hey, thinking about you, happy birthday, we love you. And it was in their, they're in their sweatpants or whatever. And then my wife clipped it all together and put it into like a happy birthday. And it was her 30th birthday. So it was even more special. And it was like, I saw it. It was, if I would have received that, I would have thought, my gosh, I'm loved. Even though from afar, people are still thinking about me. So keep celebrating those birthdays and work anniversaries.
Absolutely. Love that. I love that. I think people are getting really creative. Honestly, if you've been a month into this and you can see all the different things, we actually have a little girl in our neighborhood who's turning 7, and I got a little note from her mom. We're going to be doing a drive-by at 3:30 today, so
I
come
love
by
that.
in the car. So I'm excited. I mean, and last Wednesday, I told you this, last Friday, I was in my office, it was lunchtime, and I just hear honking and screaming. And I'm like, what is going on? I run down the end of the street. Our little neighborhood elementary school had a teacher drive by, waving at the children. And, I just think we are getting creative in ways to acknowledge and connect that we never had thought of before, kind of before pandemic, I would say. So a couple other things that people said when they were answering the questions beforehand, Brandon. Somebody's doing a random drawing, a weekly drawing for $25 gift cards for their employees. And maybe
Wow.
that's based on some kind of staff appreciation and gratitude. One person has an employee engagement committee from their staff that's thinking of ways to continue to be engaged. I think that's clever, and I think that's a great way to make a smaller kind of opportunity to think together how we can do things. And then Erin from Vanderhouen, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, she said that they created a Hoot channel where they're celebrating their shout outs and praise, and it's internal. But she said it's been great. And, they've been doing it for about a week. That's our so just some great ideas for ways you can be acknowledging and recognizing your staff. Thinking out of the box, adaptability, I think is really huge right now, and a big piece of what we're doing. So Brandon put up the pandemic business model. This is Kim Stafford. He's our Oregon Poet Laureate. And last week, the Oregonian ran many of his beautiful poems that he's been writing during this pandemic. And I'm just going to read this one in case anybody's on a phone call. Can I just read it real quick? Pandemic business model. Do you keep your hours until you sell the last onion? Do you stay open even as the shelves empty? Do you send your workers home with a good luck? Or do you pay your workers until this has passed or the money's gone, whichever comes first? Do you stand in the empty store and take a long breath counting your blessings? If you count your blessings, having given it all away, when the lights come back on, we'll shop with you. Kim Stafford, Oregon Poet Laureate. I just thought that was really beautiful about how we're trying to weather this together. So we have time for some Q&A. Anybody have any questions? And we did get some great questions, and maybe I'll try to follow up with many of you for some questions. We had some great ones. So
one question we're getting, this by several people, but will they be able to get the recording of this webinar? And the answer is yes. Well, probably later this afternoon, we'll send out the recording so you can share with your team.
Yeah.
And I think as we were talking about, like, just doing things and recognizing people and communicating, I think you got to just try things.
Yeah.
I know that's what we're doing. We're as a culture and organization that really values recognition and appreciation programs. We're just trying things, having fun with it. I mean, all bets are off at this point.
Yeah, I think this time kind of allows you a little more freedom than you typically would have. And I think go for it. Try some different things, and maybe even inquire from your employees, what would be important for them right now? And I think as we get creative, we've been given permission to do a few more things. I did want to mention, Brandon, I think we were going to give this out. I did 10 ways to cultivate kindness during social distancing. Did we send that out yet, or is it something?
No, what we'll do is in the follow-up, I'll have a link to the PDF with that. It's a great handout.
Yeah.
And share with your teams for sure.
And I do want to also mention, this is the work I do. I speak to businesses and associations about cultivating kindness. So I'm happy to offer, if anybody wants to hop on the phone with me, a 20-minute call to do a little individual brainstorming, let's do that. And if you think that I could be beneficial for your companies to talk about cultivating kindness, spreading kindness, not corona, happy to talk with you further about whether this could be beneficial for your employees as well. A webinar specifically custom for your employees. So we
do have a question. I think this is a great one, actually. So the question is, if you have a boss that doesn't really value this, and maybe it's ingrained in the culture as well, but specifically a boss, if they don't find importance in this kindness stuff, appreciation, how do you recommend, you as a teammate, contributor, how do you do this without making them look bad or kind of overstepping? your role, so to speak? Any tips
You
for
know,
that?
I think being authentic, and I would first probably go to your boss and supervisor and say, you know, this would be something that would be helpful to me. I'm wondering if this would be helpful to our other employees. Could we consider? Like, I might do that first, and maybe, or help them think it's their idea somehow. You know, if that doesn't get the reception you want, is there still some way you could, you know, you could do it as a coworker, you could do it as a team member, and it could be something maybe that you do specifically just with your team or your department. I really feel like in the work of kindness, and this is not the first time I've had a question from a, you know, from a keynote presentation where somebody says, I have somebody I work with who doesn't get this kindness stuff. But I think it's really important stuff. And I think that it's important for us to be the, you know, to be the visionary, I guess, in terms of sharing it. So I would first talk to your supervisor boss, see if you can get them to come around. Second, I would try to see if there's a workaround to try to do whatever you're thinking of anyway, in a small capacity, and see what the results are. So what about you, Brandon?
One other thing I would just add to that is I think when it comes to, you know, somebody not being bought in, I think it takes time to influence people. And so if you talk about it more and more and you surround yourself with appreciation and recognition and you just keep doing it over and over again, I think it can catch on. I mean, some people won't change, but my best my moments where I've influenced other people is because I talk passionately and with a lot of belief, and I think it's the best you can do. You can't just jam it down somebody's throat and hope that they're gonna just change. I just don't see that happening.
And often behind the resistance is maybe they need that extra love. I mean, I'm going to be honest.
Oh
Sometimes you have
yeah.
somebody who's bristly because they're dealing with hurts, and that's why they're showing up in that capacity. And if you can possibly help break that open, and this time might be a time to do that and have that authentic
Yeah.
conversation.
I
There's
think it.
another Q&A that I want to address, if that's
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
Brandon,
Please do.
from Michael. And I'm guessing this might have been something you saw on some of my information. I don't know that we shared this, but I usually refer in my work with keynoting to a study done by Dr. Sonia Lubomirsky. Here's the question. Please expand on the statement, 40% of our happiness is determined by intentional actions, our own actions or from others. So that was the question. And during my keynote, I talk about Dr. Sonia Lubomirsky, psychology professor down at UC Riverside, and she wrote a book many years ago called The How of Happiness, the Scientific Approach to Getting the Life You Want. And her research on internal happiness talked about the different things that play into that. So the first thing is your genetics. Your who your biology is, who your parents are, right? That's a percentage of it. And I'm guessing it's 30%, 10%. It's 40%, 10%, and then 50%. I'm getting my percentages less. I didn't know I was going to get this question on the fly, but your DNA and your genetics is a piece of it. Second is your living circumstances and who you, you know, your community and who you put yourself around. But 40% of our internal happiness comes from your own intentional actions. So as we go through this kindness pandemic and we feel out of control because there's so many things we cannot control, you do have control over your own actions. And so that will help elevate your happiness if you consider the things you have control over that you can take action on. So hopefully that answers that question.
I think that did a good job of answering that. There's one thing that you just mentioned that just reminded me. So when you surround yourself around, you know, happiness, kindness, those sort of things. I was thinking the other day, my wife and I decided to, instead of like Netflix or something, we decided to turn on YouTube and search for John Krasinski's
Oh
Good
yeah,
News show.
those are so
And
good.
such a great idea. I mean, just basically riddled with great ideas about how people are instilling kindness and just other good news. And I think that's the best thing you could do is think about it and see what other people are doing, and hopefully it catches on.
Yeah, so can we just reiterate? So John Kaczynski, he does Some Good News, SGN. He's done
SGN.
3 episodes so far. Start with the first one. They're about 15 minutes. Steve Carroll was on the first one. There's a surprise in the second and the third one, but baseball fans will be excited. So, and Broadway fans will be excited.
Yeah.
It was
Yes.
very fun. It's very cool. And I'll tell you, just because, you know, this is the work I do, Google kindness during Corona. Look at the images and look at the stories. And if you spend an hour doing that, you will feel so heartened by what's happening. And so that's my little tip to you, because that's what I'm doing, is looking every day for the things that are happening. There's one last question. Do we have time for one more
Yeah,
question?
let's do another question. Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, so the question was from Nathaniel, and it says, if kindness is forced but not genuine, does it send the wrong message? Good question. And, I hope that it isn't forced. I think, yeah, if it is forced, but then there's the old adage, like, fake it till you make it, if for some reason you can't put a smile on your face, try for a day to put a smile on your face and see what comes back to you. Because with that mirror neurons, I think you'll get some smiles back to you. So I, of course, would not recommend somebody not to be genuine with the kindness that they're giving. But maybe more think of the things that come naturally to you, that come easily to you. And maybe that's where you can be, spreading some kindness. I'll just share one quick last story before we wrap up, Brandon. But, my daughter is 22 and has a new boyfriend that they started dating in the December. So they're going through pandemic now, kind of in a new relationship. And he is a musician and is teaching her how to read music. And she spent half a year in France last year, so was fluent in French. So she was teaching him how to do some French basics. So that was kind of cool in the beginning of this pandemic to see them each sharing their gifts in a way that was keeping them connected, throughout this time. So
I love it.
So yeah.
Well, Linda, thank you for coming on for this webinar. I think people really got a lot of value from it. Linda's contact information is right there, phone number, email address, follow her on Facebook and LinkedIn, and go check out the podcast that Linda and I did about a year or so ago. It's the link to it is right there on the screen. Go check it out and make sure to subscribe to the podcast Transform Your Workplace too. That's where you can find episodes like that and much more. So
Thank you so much for being on. It was great.
it
Thanks,
was a
Brandon, for the opportunity.
pleasure. Thank you guys. Thanks for joining us today. We had a great group.
Okay.
All right, take care. Bye.